See, that kind of stuff is what bothers me. Like I hope that no car lets them in.
Oh, somebody went up ahead. So you got several people in the class now. Anybody there? Two people entered.
I'm here. It's
Yeah,
Nancy.
Pat. Who else there?
So
Is there
Nancy,
anybody? Has the class
Nancy,
started?
are you asking if anybody's there at Torch?
Well, no, I'm not there at Torch because we've been sitting in traffic in Houston for
Over an hour.
over an hour.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know what's going on. Has anybody from the class come in yet?
Well, this is Nancy. We've here on Zoom, we've got Joe, Charlie, Pat, Paul from San Antonio, and just an iPad. I don't know who that is.
Okay, so I don't know Rabbi. So obviously Rabbi Wolbe hasn't signed in yet.
No, I guess we were waiting for you to open the room.
I apologize, but I'm sitting here at Jensen Drive and Highway 69 since 10, well, I don't know, 9:50. I mean, no, longer than that. Yeah. We left here at what? We left the house at 9.
At
Almost
at 8:50.
Yeah, 8:50. So we've just sitting here. They've got the whole freeway exiting off right now. So I don't know what's going on. Did you call Sandy?
No, I didn't.
Sandy's behind us, but they are taking the Beltway around, so they might already be there.
And who is with Sandy? You said they.
Sandy and Mary Lou.
Okay, if Sandy's driving, let me call Mary Lou.
I'm gonna call Rabbi Wolbe real quick.
Okay,
Okay, I'm gonna put you on hold here.
okay.
See, that it can't be. It can't just be a wreck.
No, there's something that's big.
Do you want to put us on mute? Because we can hear you.
Yeah, let me go exit out here.
Is it 30, 35?
Well, I can't get out of this.
Miles per hour. Hey, there you go, buddy. Good job.
Is it 30?
What about that sign up there?
Sam.
I just WhatsApped Rabbi Wolbe just to say some kind of highway traffic delay. Just so you know.
Rod. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. I just wanted you to know I just did a quick WhatsApp to say there's a traffic delay.
Hi, Pat. For those of you who have just joined, there's some sort of traffic problem in Houston, and they're not at Torch yet. Rod, Mary Lou says that Sandy's about 4 minutes away. Oh, and Rabbi Wolby has just joined. We can't hear you yet, Rabbi Wolby, you're muted. Apparently there's some sort of traffic jam out there.
Yeah, I heard about that. I spoke to Rod just now.
No, we still can't hear you.
We just
Uh,
exited off
I
and they just,
unmuted myself. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so we have some people here in the Torch Center. We got some people. So Rod is in traffic.
yeah, I'm stuck in traffic, but just opened the freeway up and now we're on the service road. So we'll be there shortly, God willing.
Okay. And who's with you, Rod?
My son and my
Hey. I imagine that everyone who was coming from north of the city is also stuck in traffic. I don't hear Rod. Hear Rod?
Yeah, Sandy said she'd be there in about 4 minutes. Sandy and Mary Lou.
So we're gonna wait a little bit. I want to get more people here, and plus these people are chatting. Let them chat. Haven't seen each
Okay.
other in a while, so yeah.
Very good.
okay.
Yeah, so let's we'll just wait a couple more minutes. Let Sandy come and some other people filter in. Everyone can find a seat if you want. There's drinks, there's water, there's coffee. So please make yourself comfortable.
I'm gonna make Nancy. Hey Nancy, I'm gonna make you co-host so you can start letting people in the class, okay?
Okay. Ooh, power.
Hmm. With great power comes great responsibility. Don't forget that, Nancy.
Do it. Okay, you're the host. So when you see people pop up on the top of your screen, just let them in the group, okay?
Yes, sir.
But that's okay. That's not where it's supposed to be, and God made that. It was like the harder we push, the harder I push, not him, but me, harder.
Morning, Rabbi.
Hey, good to see you.
Thank you for everything.
Is that a mustache?
I'm growing a beard.
Oh, I love it.
It's I didn't start on October 7th, but a week or two later, I wanted to do something. So
That's great.
it's gray. It's gray.
Listen, I want you to grow it out nice and long so you have a rabbinic visage.
There you go. I'm going to mute myself now.
Well, that's great. There's going to be a point in time where you're going to have an urge to trim the beard. Don't give in. Look at Rod. Look how hard Rod worked to get that beard.
My sons went to Michigan Tech and they celebrated November, and they made a t-shirt with all kinds of beards on the t-shirt. It was very funny.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna turn my camera around so y'all can see everyone who's here in the room.
Oh, good. Everybody's stuck in traffic. We were leaving Kingwood and I got a text from him. He said, if you guys have not already left, 59 South is the only parking lot at Little York. So he said, you might want to take the Beltway. I said, we got on the Beltway. Siri didn't tell us. So we had to go down, come back around, loop again. Oh. I'm not even gonna complain about 288 now. Yeah. Not even gonna complain. We came from 288 and they torn it all up. It's like 55 miles an hour. There's cars all over the place, which isn't a big deal for me. I'm usually the one that's driving 55 and people are passing me like I'm standing still. But I don't know. I was like, okay, the 610 is always really bad when you exit for the 610 west. It's always like that parking lot that backs up to the exit there. Yeah, we pulled in and I'm like, we're gonna be.
That's who's there. Can they see us?
Yeah.
I was, we're
That's
gonna be-
cool.
I looked at.
Hi, Nancy.
There's lots of traffic coming down, is that right?
Well, Rob warned Mary Lou and me, so we looped around,
Oh,
but
smart,
he's stuck. He's.
smart. Wow.
So, yeah, he warned us.
Usually there's no traffic. Sunday morning is usually very, yeah. Sunday morning is usually very, very quiet.
So, yeah. I don't know.
Well, they have a game going on at NRG, right?
Yeah.
So NRG.
Doesn't stop the highway. I was, we said he was on the highway for an hour.
Hopefully.
He said it was at Little York.
Huh?
He said, when he texted Mary Lou, he said traffic was stopped at Little York on 59.
Okay. Wow. Something, but even accidents that clear out fast. You know. This is not the, you could stare, you could clear it, right? It does. Stare, clear it.
November the.
Okay.
It's like, I don't, most of the time, I don't even know what. to do.
Okay, everyone. So we're gonna have a class today, like we always do on Sunday. The only difference is that typically it's just me in the Torch Center, and now it's all of y'all beautiful people here, and then the rest of the group on the Zoom. So someone earlier said, well, this is gonna be difficult to do. It's be hard to manage the various different audiences. So I said, challenge accepted. I'm up for the challenge. I might fail, but so what? We'll try nonetheless. It's okay if you fail. That's always a first step towards succeeding. Okay, so I know some of y'all are still on the way here. That's great. As we mentioned in the past, we're going to do this, please God, once a month, where we'll have whoever wants to come join us here could join us here, and we'll still try to maintain the Zoom as well. So whoever is not here and able to come, live out of town or whatever, they could still join Zoom. That's the plan. But I think the general format's gonna remain the same, and that is we'll have the class, and everyone will mute their phones as well as their Zooms. We'll have the whole class all at once, and then we'll open the door for questions, both from people on Zoom and people in the room. And I'm happy to be here as long as is needed. So if there's anything you particularly want to address, whether it is an item that comes up in the class or something else that you want to talk about, it's an open forum. So please feel comfortable to ask any questions that you want. I may not have the answer. It won't stop me from making up something. I'm just kidding. I may not have the answer, but every question is welcome. Okay, I'm gonna get some water just from here. If anyone wants water or coffee, please feel comfortable to take. I see some people without water. There you go. Yeah, use the machine. Get some waters out, whichever. Get some waters. And then we have. So we're gonna hold these just. Okay. Today, please God, we're going to continue our 13 Principles of Faith series.
Oh.
Is that exciting, Kay? I don't hear you. You're on mute now.
Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. I meant to like video me and I pushed unmute. Sorry.
That's fine. I thought you were excited.
I am. I really am. I am.
So we're going to do that today. I'm very excited about this. It's been a couple of months since we did the last installment in this series. Turn that off. And we'll get back to our mitzvah series, Mishnah series as well, in the ensuing weeks, please God. Okay. Shall we begin? You ready? You guys ready? Awesome. Okay. Let us begin. We have arrived at the 13th and final principle of Rambam's 13 Principles of Faith. We started this project in January of 2019. And if you do the math, it's been 68 episodes covering the first 12 principles. And now we're up to principle number 13, which is the resurrection of the dead. And a quick refresher, Rambam is a very significant personality in Jewish history. He lived in the 12th century. He's one of the monumental figures of our people's glorious history. He wrote some of the most influential and consequential books and writings in our history. They're all absolute masterpieces. The one that we're following in this series is in his commentary to Mishnah. So, of course, Rabbi Judah the Prince, in the end of the 2nd century, he compiles the laws of the oral Torah into the 63 books of Mishnah, divided up into 6 orders, 6 sessions. And in one of the Mishnahs, it talks about Olam Haba, the world to come, which is the ultimate destiny that we are all striving to obtain. And Rambam, in his commentary, he wrote a commentary on all 63 books. In his commentary, he starts off with a very long introduction, which is sort of a treatise on Olam Haba, but really reward and punishment in general. And then he proceeds to delineate 13 principles, foundations, as he calls it, of our religion. What are the things that we actually believe? And what are central that create the framework, the format in which everything else can exist? Now, when Rambam did that, it was obviously hotly contested because he's differentiating between certain ideals, certain tenets, certain principles, and others. There are a lot of principles. There are a lot of mitzvos. There are a lot of details in our religion. It's comprehensive, completely, exhaustively comprehensive. Rambam separates 13 ideas and says these are the principles, and without this, you don't have a religion. When someone makes a claim like that, it's obviously going to arouse some pushback, which it did, and it was hotly contested and debated in its time. But ultimately, Rambam prevailed, and it became universally accepted by all of Israel as the framework of our religion. In fact, in multiple places, it is incorporated into our prayer, into our liturgy. So these beliefs, they have been accepted. These are the central beliefs of our people. As we mentioned in the past, it's broken down into 3 main categories. The first 5 address the notion of God. Of course, you cannot have our religion if you question the idea of God, obviously. But what does that mean? He breaks it down to 5 different elements. Section number 2 is Torah. So Torah, of course, presupposes prophecy and the prophecy of Moshe and the idea of a divine Torah and the idea of a divine Torah that doesn't change. Those are the 4 elements that he tells us are central beliefs in the middle section namely that of Torah, and finally reward and punishment, which we of course talked about, Olam Haba, the Almighty's omniscience is his total knowledge, of course Messiah, which we just finished, which is principle number 12, and finally the final element of reward and punishment, and the capstone, the conclusion of the 13 principles, and that is Tchias HaMesim, resurrection of the dead, of which there are many, of course. They will come back alive. That is this principle. And our objective in our study of this principle, as it has been hitherto, it's to study the principle as comprehensively and completely as possible. And we're going to try to hopefully gain, please God, a fundamental understanding of it and maybe all of its dimensions to the best of our abilities. And it's not getting easier. Maybe the 13th may be the hardest one of all 13 to really understand. It is not clearly explicated. Maybe that's by design, but it's not clearly explicated in the sources. There's a lot of work that we need to do to be able to unpack this principle and all of its elements. But of course, we don't shy away from a challenge. So let's begin. We're going to begin with actually citing the words of the Rambam, what he says about it, and then we'll try to get more of an introduction to the subject, which we will cover, of course, in subsequent get-togethers. He begins by telling us that this principle is a foundation of the foundations of Moshe, our teacher. And there is no religion, and there is no connection or association with the religion of Judaism to someone who does not believe in it. So he gives us a very strongly worded statement about resurrection, that it's a critical, foundational, indispensable element of our religion. And then he tells us resurrection is only for the righteous. He gives us this component, that when we're talking about resurrection as a principle of faith, it's only for the righteous. And he cites a midrash to this effect. The midrash says that when we have bountiful rain, everyone benefits. If it's a good rainy season, it makes the lands really fertile. You have two neighboring farmers, one's righteous, one's wicked, they both equally benefit. However, resurrection, it's only for the righteous. So it's interesting, the Rambam is highlighting the fact that resurrection in this context is only for the righteous. And then he adds, the Talmud tells us that the dead, that the righteous, when they are dead, they're actually alive. And the wicked, when they're alive, they're actually dead. The Torah has a very different definition of life and death. By our standards, if someone has brain activity, if someone has a pulse, if someone has consciousness, if someone's able to talk or to walk, we would define them as alive. If someone is a cadaver, they're a corpse, and they're not conscious in a way that we can perceive. They're not able to talk or to engage. They don't eat. They start to decompose. We define that person as dead. Talmud tells us in the book of Brachos on page 18b, on the top, that the Torah is a different definition. The wicked, they're dead even when they're alive, because the Torah doesn't look at the body per se, it looks at the soul. And if someone doesn't treat the soul well, doesn't feed the soul well, doesn't provide the soul's agenda, they may be alive by our standards, but in the eyes of the Torah, they're dead. Whereas the righteous, they, by definition, they're ones who are feeding their soul. And therefore, their body may have ceased to function, but their soul, why can't it exist post-mortem? So they're alive, even when they're dead. Says the Rambam, how can we say that resurrection happens to the dead? How can we say that resurrection happens to the wicked, even when they're alive, they're dead? certainly once they're dead, they're going to remain so. The Rambam is insistent that resurrection in this context is only for the righteous, which is an important note to keep in the back of our mind. We're just going to do an introduction today, but we'll hopefully pursue this further. What he's telling us is that when we're addressing resurrection, we're talking about the kind of life that the righteous have and the wicked don't have. And then he tells us that people need to die. They need to break down. They need to return to what they're composed of. Humans are hybrids. Half body, half soul, half dust of the earth, half blowing life into their nostrils. And by definition, they need to die. It's not clear what he means. The commentaries, when they address this point in Rambam, they seem to say that even after resurrection, the righteous come back alive, they'll still die. Because the points that they are comprised of have to separate. Things that are amalgamations have to come apart. Things that are comprised of various components must be broken down to their component parts, which is a subject of great debate. Now, because this is the 13th and final principle, Rambam offers a conclusion. And he talks about the importance of these 13 principles, and he uses very harsh, very strong words. And he tells us that when a person believes all of these principles, and it becomes clear to them, and they have real faith in them, then they can be part of Israel. And someone like that, they're not just biologically Jewish, culturally Jewish, in their pedigree they're Jewish. Their beliefs, their ideology is also Jewish. And it's so important to love that person and to be merciful upon that person. This is what renders someone into an ideological Jew, not just birthright, these 13 principles. And if such a person who believes these 13 principles, but they sin, they may have followed the ways of the Yetzer Hara. Nature may have overwhelmed them. Yes, they will be punished for their sins. But nonetheless, they merit a portion in Olam Haba. Eternally, they have life. Of course, the sin must be addressed. No sin goes unpunished. If you don't repent, you will have to address for it, 100%. But Olam Haba will remain their destiny. He calls them the wicked of Israel, but they're still part of Israel. However, if a person rejects, repudiates any one of these 13 principles, they have excluded themselves ideologically from the nation of Israel. They have rejected, they are heretics on central beliefs, and they're called Amin or Napitos. These are names for various names of heretics, apostates. Kotzeitz Benetios, which is a code word for someone, what it actually means is someone who cuts saplings, which means that they're severing themselves from their source. And someone like that, the Rambam concludes, it's a mitzvah to hate them. These are the people that hate Hashem. And the Rambam says, again, very harsh language, that someone who hates Hashem, it's a mitzvah for us to hate them. And then Rambam reinforces the imperative to study the 13 principles with intense concentration and repetition. And he says, I have spoken at length in these matters, and I have departed from the style of my book, the Rambam in his commentary to Mishnah, which again, that's where you find these explications of the 13 principles. It's very different than the tone and the style of the rest of the book. And he says, I've departed from the typical style, and I only did it because I saw it was very valuable, it's very beneficial. And he tells us what he did. He says, I gathered from all the disparate sources, I gathered the true beliefs of our religion. I did a lot of work because these weren't all bundled together beforehand. They're scattered. I worked to gather them into one coherent, cogent code of principles. And therefore, the Rambam speaks to the reader. You should know them, and you should repeat them, and you should review them, and you should study them intensely, many times. And you should dwell upon them and ruminate and cogitate upon them very well. And if your heart convinces you to believe that, well, I read it once or even 10 times, I've discharged my responsibility. Behold, again, the Rambam is using very unusual language for himself. Behold, Hashem knows that your heart has led you astray based upon a falsehood. And therefore, don't hurry up. Don't expedite the reading of these principles, because I didn't just concoct beliefs based upon what I encountered. This is not just a hodgepodge of beliefs. Oh, I have it. This is a nice thing. Why don't we include that? This is something. Isn't that beautiful? Let's put that in. This was not assembled arbitrarily. I put it in after intense focus and intense introspection and study. And because I saw clear, true, lucid beliefs, and I saw other ones that were fake, that were false, that were crooked and corrupt. I saw what you should believe in and what you should not believe in it, and I brought proofs to substantiate it. That's why I put these together. And he ends off with a prayer. The Almighty should help me to actualize my desire and to guide me in the good path. And then he says, he concludes his treatment of the 13 principles. Let me return to the matters of the Mishnah that I am commentating upon. So the Rambam does end his explication of 13 principles by telling us of the importance of it and how he went about to assemble it, and the importance of studying it not just on a cursory surface level, on a superficial level, but to go deep. And I think that in our series, in our studies of these principles, we've really strived to do that, to really study it in a very deep and comprehensive way. So let's talk about the 13th and final principle, resurrection of the dead. The dead, they stopped working, they died, cessation of brain activity, flatlined, they're buried. They will come back to life. What does this mean? What must we know about this? As we tried to do with the previous principles, we hope to cover this subject to its length and breadth, examine everything that we know about it, everything that we can perhaps speculate about it, to try to see all the dimensions of it, and there are a lot of dimensions. We have a lot of questions. What is resurrection? What does it mean? How does it work? How does resurrection happen? Why must we have resurrection? Why is there a need to fuse body and soul? Isn't the body a fungible, disposable commodity? What's wrong with the soul existing as a soul in the realm of souls? Isn't the soul all that really matters? Why is there a need to get the band back together to put the soul and body once again together? Very basic questions. When is the resurrection going to happen? Or did it happen? What's the timeline of resurrection? Rambam was very clear that resurrection happens to the righteous. What about the fate of the wicked? What happens with them? Are there different types of resurrection? Is it all the same? Is all resurrection uniform? Why, in fact, is resurrection only for the righteous? What happens afterwards? Okay, you've been brought to life. Congratulations. What now? What's the purpose? What are you supposed to do now that you have been resurrected? The basic questions of how, of what, of who, of when, of why, they're not clear at all from what we've seen. It's a massive subject. And I think it's even more unclear than Messiah, which was, again, a very broad, sprawling subject. And we're going to try to approach it from the outside and hopefully edge our way closer and closer to the heart of the matter. So let's begin with some citations of our sages. The Mishnah that Rambam bases his whole treatise on reward and punishment and the 13 principles of faith upon, it starts off with the iconic words, Kol Yisrael, all of Israel, Yesh Lahem Chelek Olam Haba. They have a portion in Olam Haba. The world to come, the ultimate world, all of Israel have a portion in it, with the exception of certain people. And these are the ones that lose their portion in Olam Haba. And the first person who is cited, Ha'omer Ein Tchias HaMesim Min HaTorah, the person who says there is no resurrection of the dead from the Torah. There's no citation in the Torah that proves the notion of resurrection. If someone says, well, resurrection is not a Jewish idea, it's not a Torah idea, they are the first category of Jews that are expelled from the cohort of people that have Olam Haba. Now, it's interesting that the Mishnah specifically says that the person who loses Olam Haba is one who questions the legitimacy of resurrection. It doesn't just say someone who questions resurrection. It says specifically someone who questions the biblical sources, the scriptural sources of resurrection. There's a very beautiful comment in Rashi where Rashi says, even if someone believes in resurrection, but doesn't know that it's sourced in the Torah, in the words of Rashi, what do we care about his belief? How does he know? Where is it substantiated? If it's just a belief that's not grounded in something real, if it's just some nice idea that a person has, that would not suffice. You have to really understand it. You have to know that it's legitimized and substantiated in the Torah. So this is obviously very important. The very first person that is excluded from Olam Haba is one who questions the legitimacy and the scriptural origin of resurrection. But what exactly is resurrection? The Rambam gives us very, very sparse details here. He does write more elsewhere. In fact, there's an entire work, a treatise of Rambam on Tchias HaMesim, on resurrection. Hopefully we'll get to that in due course. But just as an outsider, my initial analysis, I think, reveals maybe 4 different definitions to the idea of resurrection. And again, we're with the very early stages of just trying to understand the concept. So I think on a most basic level, something that we're all very familiar with. At night, we go to sleep. The Talmud tells us that sleep is an element of death. It's a 60th of death. It has some associations. There's some overlap between going to sleep, being comatose effectively in bed, and death. In some way, it's similar. Yes, there's still brain activity. Yes, there's still a pulse. There's still life, but there are some signs of death, meaning that someone's not aware of their surroundings. Someone doesn't see. Someone doesn't hear, per se. You really have to shake them awake if you want to get their attention. You have to snap them out of that. Their soul, we know, to a certain extent, leaves the body. And in fact, the Talmud says that waking up in the morning is an element of resurrection. And that's why the Talmud instructs us that when a person wakes up, there's a prayer about the soul. And the prayer says, God, so it starts, the soul that you have placed within me is pure. You formed it. You installed it within me. You guard it within me. And you, in the future, will take it away from me and return it to me in the future. For all the time that the soul is within me, I thank you, Hashem, our God, the God of our forefathers, the master of all the worlds, the overseer of all the souls. And then we have the final blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed you Hashem, who restores the souls to dead corpses. When you wake up, the Talmud tells us, it's a version of resurrection. Now, I don't think the Rambam is telling us what to believe in waking up in the morning. We all believe that. That's not what he's saying, but I think it's a good way to get our brains more accustomed to the notion of resurrection, that it's like a parable almost. And it helps us bring the concept a little bit closer to our sensibilities, that this idea of resurrection is in some small way, it's like a parable. It's an analogy towards the resurrection that is being addressed over here. When someone's asleep, you've heard this term, they're dead to the world. They're immobile. They're really unaware of their body or their surroundings. They don't see, they don't walk around. Some people do, I know. But most people don't walk around. They don't eat. The soul, we know, goes to other places. And then in the morning, there is a degree of resurrection. So again, this is not what Rambam is talking about, but the Talmud does connect this routine of going to sleep at night and having a degree of death and waking up in the morning and a degree of resurrection. It's an interesting way to help get our sensibilities a little bit closer to what's happening over here. In Genesis, Jacob talks about his death. And he uses the words, not I will die, I will be buried, I will expire. He says, I will go to sleep. And again, we see that Jacob, this is in Genesis chapter 47, verse 30, Jacob is using the words, I'm going to sleep, which we know implies perhaps waking up as well. He uses that term because the righteous will have resurrection. It might be a longer sleep. And maybe a lot of other things happen in the duration. But fundamentally, there is an overlap between going to sleep and waking up and going to die and waking up with resurrection. So that's maybe one way to think about level one. A second way to think about it is the citations that we have, the stories that we have of resurrection. People who were dead. There was a cessation of all signs of life, and they came back. In chapter 17 of the book of Kings, Kings 1, Elijah revives the dead. And his student, Elisha, also revived the dead. This is in Kings 2, chapter 4. And then we have the memorable description of Ezekiel, Yecheskel, in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, with all the bones coming back to life. So, I don't know if this is exactly what Rambam is talking about, but we do see this notion, and we have documentation of this idea that someone can be dead and can have that reversed via some prophet, either Elijah, Elisha, or Ezekiel, and there are other instances as well. That can happen where death can be undone. It can be reversed. Now, there is an interesting question that the commentaries ask about this form of resurrection. The Talmud in the book of Tanis, page 2a, tells us that there are 3 keys that are exclusively in the hands of God. He doesn't outsource these keys to others. And they are the key of rain. God decides when it rains, how it rains, where it rains, etc. The key of life. And the key of resurrection. These are keys that can only be utilized and deployed by God. So wait a minute, how is Elijah using this key, or Elisha, or Ezekiel? So there are various answers. Some say that, well, permanently these keys are only in the hands of God, but temporarily a prophet who is obviously deserving of it can access said key. Alternatively, these were actually done by God, but the prayer only got God to do it. But this is, I think, another way of thinking about resurrection. This is more than just waking up in the morning. It's not really a total paradigm shift, because someone is dead, we're familiar with that. Someone being alive, we're also familiar with that. We've seen people who are alive by our definition. And of course, the notion of people dying is also not distant from our understanding. It's not clear if this is really what Rambam is talking about, that the resurrection, so to speak, effectuated by or through Elijah, Elisha, and Ezekiel. Is that exactly what he's mentioning, or what he's invoking here in this principle? It's not so clear. But I think it's a level up from the notion of going to sleep and waking up in the morning. And then we get to the other 2 elements of resurrection. Resurrection that will occur during Messiah. We have many sources that talk about, in the times of Messiah, we mentioned this very briefly in our discussion of Messiah. We have many sources that say that during the Messianic era, there will be those who died who come back alive. And again, we know that Messiah, that is a perfection of our world. Messiah is a time where this world becomes transformed and refined and perfected. So there's still mitzvos, and there's still humans with a body and a soul, but it's a more elevated kind of life. And we have a temple, and we have a Davidic monarchy, etc. But it's not a total paradigm shift. It's this world and all the rules governing this world. Everything about this world is the same. It's just much better, much more elevated and transformed. That is perhaps what the Rambam is telling us. Maybe that in the times of Messiah, there will be a resurrection of the righteous. And just as Messiah in general is an opportunity for people to be elevated and transformed and perfected and refined, so too the people who come back alive will have that opportunity. They too will be availed. It will be availed to them the opportunity to earn the perfection that is accorded in the times of Messiah. And finally, the 4th and final dimension, just again, as an outsider trying to get into the subject, the 4th and final dimension is the resurrection that is associated not with this world, but with Olam Haba. And that is something which is a total paradigm shift, because everything that we know about this world does not apply in the world to come. There's almost no overlap between our world and the next world. Even the great prophets were told they were not capable of understanding, of visualizing, of understanding in a fundamental way what it means, Olam Haba. And the sources are clear, just as we have sources that tell us that there's a resurrection in the times of the Messiah. The sources are very clear that there is a resurrection that is linked to Olam Haba. And you don't have to go very far. Once you finish the Mishnah about all of Israel has a portion of the world to come, besides for these people, lists all the people. The very first line in the Talmud, which is the commentary on the Mishnah, the Talmud asks the following question. V'kol kach lama. Why so harsh? Why does someone who rejects resurrection, why do they lose their portion Olam Haba? It seems a little bit draconian. Seems harsh. Seems very severe. And the answer will leave no doubt about the link between Olam Haba and resurrection. Who kafar b'tchias hamesim? The person who repudiates resurrection of the dead. Therefore, it's only fitting that he loses his resurrection of the dead. Again, if you read this Talmud, it's abundantly clear. The Talmud is saying that resurrection of the dead is synonymous with Olam Haba. Because again, the Mishnah says, these are the people who lose Olam Haba. The first person who loses it is someone who rejects resurrection of the dead. Why, says the Talmud? Well, if you reject it, you don't have it. It's obvious. It seems fitting. Tit for tat. If you don't want this, you don't believe in this, okay, you don't have this. But the Talmud is using resurrection of the dead and Olam Haba interchangeably. Because the Mishnah is talking about why someone loses Olam Haba, and the Talmud says, well, you lose Olam Haba if you don't believe in resurrection because you lose resurrection. And there's no portal, there's no pathway to get to Olam Haba without resurrection of the dead. So evidently we see that resurrection is not only about going to sleep, waking up, or Elisha bringing back someone to this world, or even in times of Messiah, when this world is more perfected and elevated and refined, the righteous coming back to achieve their elevation that they need in the times of Messiah. There is an element of resurrection that is some sort of portal and pathway to Olam Haba. And if you don't have resurrection, definitionally, the Talmud tells us, you don't have Olam Haba. Now, which one of these four is Rambam addressing? Rambam is completely moot at this point. We have no idea. Or, again, maybe we do have an idea, but at least upon initial study of his words, we don't really see it. Now, again, we're just trying to kind of survey the landscape here before we go deep into any of these subjects. The Mishnah tells us that you have to believe in resurrection to be a member of Olam Haba. But it's not enough to believe in resurrection. You have to also believe that the source of resurrection is in the Torah. So the Talmud says, okay, well, where's the source? Citation needed. Where does it say in the Torah that the dead will come back alive? So the Talmud begins to cite numerous sources that prove this point. And the first proof is about tithes. We know that there are all sorts of tithes that you must do to be compliant with the laws of tithes in the Torah. Got to give 10% to the Levite. You got to give 2% to the Kohen. The 10th animal is the tithing of the animals. The first 3 years of a fruit tree. There's many laws. And then there's year 7, where's the cessation of work, the Shemitah. Year 50, the Oval. There is a tithe called Trumas Meiser. It's like a tithe for a tithe. I give 10% of my field, of my yield, to the Levi. The Levi, in turn, has to pay his taxes, so to speak. He's got to give 10% of that to the Kohen. And this is featured in the book of Numbers, chapter 18. And the verse is like this. The Levite takes 10% and gives it to Aaron the Kohen. Wait a minute. Aaron died before the conquest of Canaan and before any of the laws of tithing were implemented. He never entered the land. He was buried on Mount Hor, outside the land. Aaron was never a recipient of this tithe, the tithe from the tithe that the Levite gives to the Kohen. Yet it says the Levite gives it, doesn't say to the Kohen generically, to Aaron the Kohen. Conclude the Talmud, it must be that Aaron at one point will be a recipient. This tithe from a tithe, you give 10% to the Levite, and the Levite gives 10% to Aaron the high priest. Well, Aaron's dead. And he died before these laws were ever implemented. It must be that the Torah is telling us that Aaron will once again rise from the dead and receive the tithe from the tithe. We have a conclusive proof in the Torah from the book of Numbers, chapter 18, verse 28, to the concept of the resurrection of the dead. Now, this is a very interesting proof, obviously. The Talmud doesn't cite any way to rebut it, but there's an amazing comment in Rashi, which throws a little bit of a wrench, but there's a lot of wrenches already in the subject. When the Talmud says that Aaron will come back alive, Rashi says he'll come back alive le olam haba, for olam haba. And this is a bit surprising because we know, and we've seen this in the past, and the Talmud says this repeatedly, that the world of olam haba is different than the world that we have today. And it tells us that there's no eating and there's no drinking in olam haba. I would imagine there's no agriculture in olam haba either. Yet the Talmud says that Aaron will rise, resurrection, okay, and he'll be a recipient of an agricultural tithe. Evidently, the world that he's coming back to, it's a world where agriculture still exists. Yet Rashi says in his comment, Aaron will rise le olam haba, for the purpose of olam haba. It's a little bit of a problematic Rashi, but any problem is another insight that we can perhaps pursue. Regardless, this is yet another source that makes it clear, this Rashi comment is another source that makes it clear that resurrection is intimately linked with olam haba. A second proof. This is all from the book of Sanhedrin on page 90b. What's the source for resurrection in the Torah? So we have one from Aaron. We have a second one from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In the beginning of the book of Exodus, Parshas Va'era, Hashem tells Moshe, I will uphold my covenant that I made with the forefathers. This is when Moshe didn't want to go back because he started to try to save the Jewish people, but their conditions worsened. And God differentiates the relationship that he had with the forefathers and the relationship that he's having now with Moshe. And then God says, this is Exodus chapter 6, verse 4, I will uphold my covenant with them, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give them the land of Canaan. It doesn't say to give to you, to the nation, the land of Canaan. To give them. Well, they died in the past, and they died before the nation that they spawned acquired the land, conquered the land, settled the land. They must be, they're coming back. And they're coming back, and then this will be fulfilled. The covenant where God promised to give them the land, it will be fulfilled after the resurrection. So here we see a citation that the forefathers, they will live in the land of Israel, which again implies a terra firma based living, and that's a proof for the resurrection. A third proof, the verse in Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 11. This is part of the Shema, the second paragraph of the Shema, where again the verse says that God promised your forefathers to give them the land of Israel. Not to give you, to give them. Must be the coming back. Seems pretty airtight and convincing. A fourth proof. This is also from the book of Devarim, chapter 4, verse 4. You are cleaving to Hashem your God, Chaim kulchem hayom. Life, all of you today. Life, all of you today. That's what it says. Everyone's alive today. The word today, the Talmud understands, is superfluous. Obviously, it's talking to everyone today. So what does it mean? Why would you have to add the extra word? It must be that this verse is telling us that the life that you have today, you will have in the future as well. And you'll be alive in the future as you are today. Now, I'm just giving you some example, a little bit of flavor of how the Talmud proceeds to unpack this subject. It cites numerous such proofs, more than a dozen, to substantiate the notion of the resurrection of the dead from the Torah. There are many, many sources, as we've seen. It's not clear why this is all needed. You know, that the Mishnah says you have to believe in resurrection of the dead, and then it comes from the Torah. Okay, so one proof would suffice, you would imagine. Why does the Talmud labor to find so many inferences in the Torah to the principle of the resurrection? Perhaps, again, this is just me speculating as a total outsider to the subject. Perhaps these are not necessarily proofs to the same idea. Maybe each proof is a different element, a different dimension of resurrection. And again, where we're total outsiders, it's a murky and opaque subject. But from the fact that the Talmud really belabors this idea of trying to find sources of the Torah for the resurrection, maybe there's more nuance than what appears to be on the surface. But we're just trying to get comfortable with this whole idea of the dead coming back alive. And I want to cite some sources, some pieces in the Talmud about the resurrection, which I think will help bring the concept a bit closer to us. There's a very interesting motif that repeats itself in the Talmudic literature about the resurrection. The Talmud records many conversations between great rabbis and Roman nobility about the subject of resurrection. Now, this is an interesting idea, the idea that I come back alive. It fascinates us. Apparently, it fascinated the Romans as well. And the Roman aristocracy would call over the great rabbis and say, okay, well, help me understand this part, help me understand that part of resurrection. And the Talmud cites a bunch of examples of conversations. It documents conversations between the Roman leaders and high society and the greatest rabbis of the era. Here's some citations. This is again from Sanhedrin 90b. Cleopatra the queen. She asked Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is a very important personality in the Mishnaic literature because he's the primary author of the Mishnah. When Rabbi Judah the Prince assembled the Mishnah, he started off just the base upon which he started were the notes and the writings of Rabbi Meir. So this is the most reputable, authoritative source that we can come up with. Now we have a conversation cited in the Talmud between Cleopatra the queen and Rabbi Meir. And it went like this. She said, I know that the dead will come back alive. I don't question that. That she accepts. But when they come back alive, will they be clothed or will they be naked? That was her question. Is it a silly question? Sounds kind of silly. That's what she said. And he responded, I will prove to you from a wheat kernel. When you bury, remember that word, you bury a wheat kernel. We have a difference. We have a difference between burying and planting. The Talmud often, and we'll see this is another repeating theme in the literature about resurrection. The Talmud uses the term burying and planting interchangeably in this context because it's the same thing. You bury wheat Not because you don't want to see it ever again, because you actually do want to see it in a much more beautiful way. You want it to surface, you want one kernel to sprout a whole bushel, right? That's what you want. And it describes it as bearing. Planting is bearing. And bearing is planting. Hold that thought. Says the great rabbi, the wheat is buried naked. And when it emerges, it has many, many layers. That's the chaff. Well, the righteous, they're buried, clothed. Seems to be implying the burial shrouds that we bury the dead with. So if something which is buried naked comes out clothed, certainly something which is buried clothed comes out clothed. That was his response to Cleopatra as cited in the Talmud. Now, it is important to note, just as the Rambam told us again and again, resurrection is only for the righteous. He does say, tzaddikim, the righteous who are buried clothed, when they emerge, they will certainly emerge clothed. Again, he seems to limit at least this form of resurrection to the righteous exclusively. And we have a parable. The death and burial equals planting, just as the planting of the wheat, you can expect it to emerge in a different dimension, a different way, in a more expanded way, in a more clothed fashion. So too, the burial, that too is a form of planting. Now, what does it mean to emerge clothed? And what exactly is this analogy? If you were to take a seed and put it in the ground, something which is very similar to the seed emerges, but also very different. We think of the dead coming back alive as bringing the band back together. What we're told over here is that the relationship between the righteous before their burial/planting and the righteous after their emergence from the ground, it's similar to what changes to the wheat when you put one kernel and all bushel comes out. It's the same thing, but in a much more realized, actualized, developed way. Again, these are all ideas that we'll hopefully revisit. We have the next citation, the very next part of the Talmud. Caesar, the Caesar, says to Rabban Gamliel, again, he was the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin, the president of the Jewish people. And we have an amazing documentation of a conversation that they had. Unlike Cleopatra, who accepted the notion of resurrection, he says, I don't know, you guys say that resurrection happens. Amrisu, you say that the dead will come back alive. How can that be? The dead, they're dust. Can dust live? That's a pretty sharp question. You put a body into the ground, it starts to decompose. You dig it up and you don't find the body. The body's gone. Well, what do you have? You have dust. What happened to the body? The body became one with the dust. The dust is not alive. It's inanimate. So how can dust come back alive? That was the Caesar's question. And the great rabbi doesn't even respond. The Talmud tells us that there was a third person privy to this conversation, the Caesar's daughter. And she says to the great rabbi, I will respond. I got this. And this is her answer. Suppose you have two contractors in a city, two people building things in the city. One builds edifices out of water. One builds edifices out of mortar. Which one's more impressive? So the Caesar responds, well, anyone could build, well, not anyone. Most people who are gifted in construction, they could build a building out of bricks, out of mortar, out of cement. But to build something out of water, that's way more impressive. So it's established. Building out of water is much harder than building out of mortar. Says the daughter of Caesar to Caesar, God today creates humans out of water. The building blocks of a human is fluid. That happens. If God could create humans out of water, of course he could create them out of dust. Today, all the living humans are created, to go back to the actual origin, out of fluid, out of water. And we're not very impressed by that because we are so accustomed to it. But you already told me, Sir Caesar, that water-based construction is much more impressive than mortar-based construction. And this is if you think about resurrection. And it makes a lot more sense. It seems to us to be fantastic because it's just not what we're used to. But is it really so hard to create humans out of dust? It's much easier than to create them the way that you're doing it today. It's much easier if we were being honest. Thus concludes the opinion of the daughter of Caesar, cited in the Talmud. Now, there's a very deep subtlety being conveyed here. Humans today are formed one way, in a water-based construction. In the future, they will be made in a different way, in a dust-based construction. I mentioned this in my book, Upon a 10-Stringed Harp, which I have several chapters in part 5 of the book on resurrection. I pointed out something very interesting about this conversation. We know of exactly one person that was created out of dust. Of course, that's Adam. All subsequent humans were created out of water, out of the fluids. But he was created out of the dust of the earth. The Talmud is implying that the kinds of humans that will be featured in the world of the resurrection will not be like us. They will be more like Adam. Now, Adam is completely different than the way we are. The Midrash tells us that when Adam was created, initially out of dust, the angels were so taken by him, they mistook him for God, and they wanted to bow down to him. The distance, so to speak, between the human and God was much less than it is today. Angels do not conflate us with God. I guarantee you that. They do not. But Adam, created from the dust, was a completely different paradigm. And the Talmud is implying from this analogy, cited initially by the daughter of Caesar, that the resurrection is the recreation of humanity in the paradigm of Adam. Not simply to come back in the way we are today. The seed looks very different than the final product. What comes back out is very different than the water-based construction of that same person in the previous paradigm. Again, very, very interesting. Now, there are other sources about conversations between the Romans and the great rabbis. The Talmud actually offers a second alternative interpretation as to what the daughter of Caesar said to her father. We have a very interesting conversation between Rabbi Judah the Prince, the architect of the Mishnah, and the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, also about resurrection. Again, we see that the Romans were really fascinated by this. And that will reveal another dimension of the resurrection, namely that of judgment, which is central to this subject. Judgment, ultimate judgment, has to happen in the same modality as the sins and the mitzvos that were done. You want to reward and punish the same entity that did the mitzvah or the crime. If you have twins and one of them commits a crime, you can't punish the other one just because they look the same, right? It's not fair. The body and soul do the mitzvos. The body and soul do the sins. The body and soul must be there for the reward and the punishment. And we'll see more about that and the very fascinating conversation between Richard the Prince and Antoninus that really bears that out. But we're just getting warmed up here. There are many dimensions of this subject that we hope to start to dive into deeply. There are all sorts of very intricate debates in the medieval literature, some of the contentious points about this idea. Maybe the most central debate is, what is the state of the human in the world to come and the world of resurrection? Is there a body? Yes or no? What's the nature of said body if there is a body? We'll try to get into that as well. The whole idea of the seventh millennium, which is just like we have, the 6 days of creation and Shabbos, we have the 6,000 years that we've mentioned in the past, and then the seventh millennium, what happens during that great 1,000-year period. It's a mystery to us. What happens subsequently in the 8th or maybe the 9th millennium, a total mystery. The idea of Yovel factors into this discussion as well, because Yovel is the notion of 6 years, then the 7th, and then another 6 years in the 7th, and then another 6 years in the 7th, and 7 cycles of 7. And finally, it spins out of the 7-cycle format and it goes into year 50, which is not year 1 of a cycle, but it's something else. It's an entirely different dimension. That is very much associated with the notion of resurrection of the dead and Olam Haba, as we shall hopefully see. There is in the literature this great, awesome day of judgment, this idea of final reconciliation of everything. A lot of subjects lay before us. There's a lot to talk about, and we're just getting started. We are at the point of the 13th principle, 13th one, resurrection of the dead. I'm excited to hopefully go through these subjects with y'all in the ensuing weeks and months. Again, I'm at the beginning stages. There's a lot to read, a lot to study, a lot to analyze, a lot to ponder. But hopefully with the help of the Almighty, we will be able to go through this principle and gain a deep fundamental understanding on its various elements and dimensions to the best of our abilities. Again, we'll probably reach points where we'll have to cry uncle and throw up our hands and say, well, this is something which is beyond us. That's okay, as long as we understand what is beyond us. What do we know about what we don't know? That is a very good place to arrive at. Hopefully lay it out and organize it in a systematic way as we've strove to do hitherto. I'm looking forward to doing this. It's going to be really exciting. And of course, my email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and your feedback. This was a delight. It's a challenge. And I'm looking forward to digging into it with y'all, please God, in the upcoming episodes in the weeks and months to come. Okay, so let's talk about it here.
Who will be the first victim?
Okay, so
let me just let people that are in the class see everybody else.
I don't see your video on. Is your video on?
You know what, my video.
Because I'm in the chat and I don't see anything from you.
Okay, well, it's because probably my video is up. Let me share.
Yeah, your video's off. I see your stoic picture in your library. In your
goodness. How did I do that? Not so much for that. I was going to give everybody a sneak peek into the class.
Well, I could do it. I could just sneak around. Ta-da!
Well, look at that. That's even better.
Hey.
There you go. Everybody can be seen. Means that I can go offline then. Yeah, don't forget, guys, that are online, Rabbi Carmody will be with us at 3 p.m. from Israel, so he will be there. Anybody have questions, comments, concerns?
So this was great. I'm happy with this experiment. It was nice to have a group here, live and in person, and also a group here. They said it was a big challenge. Rabbi, you probably can't pull it off. It's too hard. It's too hard. So I feel like the Zoom audience, I wasn't kind of looking at y'all as much as I typically do. I was more like looking around, But
You did good.
I did good. Thank
You
you.
did good, Rabbi. It worked great.
Okay,
And I
that's-
was going to say, great class. Loved it. Great.
Awesome.
Your lectures and it's like mind Zumba.
It's Mind Zumba.
Yeah.
It's Mind Zumba on Zoom.
I don't even know what that is.
It's a.
Exercise.
Oh. I thought that was something that goes around the house, cleans your floors.
It's Roomba.
A Roomba, a mind Roomba.
Oh, I like that. A Mind Roomba. Can y'all hear the people in the back here? You don't hear them?
No. Muffled. You'll have to repeat.
Oh yeah, if someone asks the question, I'll repeat it so that y'all can hear it clearly. But someone was saying that my classes are Mind Zumba, not to be confused with Mind Roomba. I'm not sure which one I like. I like both of them. Okay, who wants to go first? Yeah, go ahead, David.
You talked about it being a mitzvah for the Jewish people to hate those other Jewish people who reject.
Yes, that's what the Rambam says.
That doesn't fall into like the baseless hatred.
No, that's not baseless. It's not baseless. The verse that he cites is that I will hate those who hate Hashem. And the Rambam is defining someone who does not believe in these principles as someone who hates Hashem. So it's not baseless.
So on that same note, so like the forgive me if I'm mispronouncing, the Tzaddikim, the Parashim and the Tzaddikim, the Sadducees, they didn't believe in the resurrection.
So yeah, it would be mitzvah to hate them. That's what he's saying. Yeah, not tzaddikim, but Sadducees, Tzidokim.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so I don't know if y'all heard the question. Do y'all hear the question?
It might be good to repeat because there is a
Yeah.
difference between the Tzedokah and
David was asking about when the Rambam cites the verse where it says that you're supposed to hate someone who hates Hashem, and he defines someone who hates Hashem as someone who doesn't believe in 13 principles. David was asking as to, is that baseless hatred? And the answer is no, it's not baseless hatred. And then he cited the historical example of someone of a group of Jews who didn't believe in some of these principles, namely the Sadducees, and those people would qualify according to this Rambam. Yes.
Is that why you think that realm of Judaism disappeared?
Well, all fake versions of Judaism eventually disappear. Yeah, the Karaites were very popular for a couple hundred years, and then they're gone. Because.
And this includes the ideological Jews, not just the formal Jews.
Not just what? I'm sorry.
Includes the.
Yeah, we're talking about different groups of Jews that repudiate central elements of our religion. They don't really last historically. They don't last that long. They have their heyday and then they peter out and they disappear. Well, yeah, the verse that he cites, let me pull it up for you. 1 second. He cites it, I believe it's in Psalms. Psalms 139. I'll find you the exact source. It's 139, and it is verse. It is verse 21. So 139, 21. Okay, who else here? Someone on Zoom, chime in. I don't want y'all to feel that you're out of the loop here, so chime in. Who wants to go first? Yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Yeah, I want to ask a question, but as usual, it kind of has to trickle down before I can make sense of my question. So I'm going to take a stab at formulating it here online. But it ties in with the podcast when you were talking about Abraham, and these two dimensions of Abraham, where it was like the in potentia and then his full potential. It's kind of like these two Abrahams. You
Yes.
had a lot of points about the name. So then I'm looking at Exodus 3:6, but before in verse 4, it says Moshe, and he says, "Here I am."
Yeah, Moshe
And
is one of the
so
four people, one of the four people that the Midrash says are double named. So
double
Moshe would
named.
qualify as someone who did achieve his full potential.
So those are just two ideas that I haven't fully formulated into words. But let's go back to Adam. When you said the angels looked at Adam and thought he was God. So there's like this Adam in potentia that when he was first created, he was like this perfect being. Am I understanding that right? Before he sinned?
Yeah, so it's everything about Adam before his sin. It's like all about it's beyond us to really fully
Yeah,
understand.
okay.
But the nature of what he had to do, because when we spoke about the podcast was about how Abraham was being told Lech Lecha. He was told to go do something. Adam was told that he's supposed to la'avda u'lashamra. He's placed in the garden to work the garden and to protect the garden. Adam's work or Adam's mission was much more stationary than Abraham's. He was about maintaining, really perpetuating what he is, not so much as working to accomplish what his potential was. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think that's a way to think about the Abraham paradigm in the context of Adam.
Yeah,
So,
I think what I'm trying to tie in is with the resurrection from the dead, will a resurrected Adam return that is perfected. Does that make any sense?
yes, it does. The way I would answer your question is that the definition of resurrection of the dead is the restoration of Adam before sin. That's exactly what I would say. Huh? For which is Adam.
That's
Yes.
reunification.
Yes.
And are we all like minuscule pieces of this soul of Adam where we're responsible for rectifying whatever is amiss within our own selves?
Yes, we have spoken about this a few times. Of course, it's a very, very advanced question. But the sources do say that the Jewish nation, if you compile all their souls together, all 600,000 souls that were at the foot of the mountain, it was a replica of Adam. That's what it says. What that means, it's more of a mystery. And we did speak about the difference in a Jewish soul and a non-Jewish soul. We had that class about that as well. Titled, you can listen to it again, The Unique Markers of a Jewish Soul. So that's where we get into the whole nature of the soul of Adam and really the reconstitution of said soul in Olam Haba.
Rabbi,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about okay, you were saying we're supposed to separate or not associate it from people who do not believe in Hashem, right? Or believe in the book.
Says we don't have to love them. It's mitzvah to hate them. That's what he says. Very
right. Okay.
short words.
Okay. So, what about Jews who don't know enough to not believe but don't want to believe?
So
what do you do there?
You're talking about someone who's called a tinok shenishba, which is the term.
I've never heard that.
Tinok is a baby, shenishba who was taken captive.
Okay.
Yeah, captive child. Yeah, that's a child who was taken captive. You know, they grew up away from their family and they don't know anything because they were taken captive. Someone today who doesn't grow up with a strong knowledge of Jewish values and or Jewish principles, shall we say, someone like that would not qualify. He wouldn't qualify he or she would not qualify as a heretic because they're actually they're more about a child of taken captive. They were not literally held captive, but effectively it's the same thing. They didn't grow up necessarily with.
And even if they're
so
even if they are anti.
Well, again, I think that so long as they're a captive, it's a different story.
Okay, thank you.
And there are other categories.
Of course, yeah. Okay, who else here wants to chime in? Yeah. Where does Eve fit in? Right. So she's maybe like a hybrid. It's a great question. Because she doesn't come from fluid either, right? She comes from Adam, right? So she's still the handiwork of God himself, so to speak, right? So I would say that she definitely qualifies as creation from the dust, not creation from the fluid.
So whatever Adam.
Yes, it's out of the same handiwork of God. Yes. Talmud does describe the creation of Eve as the handiwork of God. It says those words. So that means that even though it's not exactly the same dust, but it's the same effective state. And again, the verse does say that Adam and Eve were actually created at the same time, with two faces. So it was like a Siamese twin.
They were back to back.
Back to back, exactly. Yes. Yeah, again, I don't want to get into this whole subject because it's a very big and mysterious subject. But I would say, to answer your question, Mary Lou, yes, Eve would qualify as being created from dust. Again, and the nature of that and how that works, it's a complicated question. But certainly to answer your question, yes. My answer is yes. But yeah, very sharp question. You go ahead, Mike.
So the righteous will be resurrected.
Yes.
There'll be two resurrections, one during the days of Mashiach and one at the end of time.
Yes.
What separates the people that get resurrected during the days of Mashiach? They need to finish something that they didn't accomplish compared to the ones who get resurrected later, like Aaron. He comes back then.
We're going to have to ask that question. It's a very, very good question. It's one of the central questions that we'll hopefully dig into. Because again, we were just trying to lay out the landscape first. And once we have a little bit of a feel of the landscape, then we can say, okay, well, resurrection of Messiah, why? Who, why, how? Yeah, very, very sharp question. Oh, Paul. Paul wanted to know the question. Mike asked about the kinds of people. I don't want to butcher your question, but the kinds of people that are going to come back in resurrection in the times of Messiah versus the kinds of people that come back in the ultimate resurrection, end of time, to use his words. So that was his question, and my answer is we'll have to wait and see. But I didn't tell him that. I'm telling you that.
So
go ahead.
There's essentially two.
Yeah, we said that. Yeah, or maybe more. I don't know.
I just kind of go back to this question. So at the very beginning, when you were talking about how it's permissible to hate somebody that doesn't believe in the certain principles, what does that hatred look like? Because there are so many, like, especially now since October 7th, like we're seeing a lot of justifications for the hatred of Jews because they're considered infidels, they're considered apostates, unclean, whatever. So there's other theologies that also permit hate, and it comes out in several different ways. I don't feel like those types of hatred would be permissible in Judaism. So like, look, what does that hatred look like?
Okay, so let me repeat what's your name?
Matt.
Matt or Max?
Matt.
Matt's question is about the nature of the hatred that is appropriate, according to the Rambam, for people who don't believe in 30 principles, which again, we're defining exclusively as the people that are not a teenage nishma, not a captive child. Yes? So yes, and his question was, well, does hate equal violence? Is it open season against these people? The answer is no. There's no permission to do any violence to these people. What he says is that there are many, many mitzvos that you're supposed to love your fellow Jew. Those mitzvahs will not apply to this person. It doesn't mean you're allowed to do anything harmful to them, but the requirement to love your fellow as yourself will not apply to them. And that is calling hate. But nothing active. You can't do any active act of hatred.
So it's like a passive hate.
Yeah, it's you can withhold what you typically accord to your brethren from that person.
So the positive mitzvahs
Don't apply, exactly. Yeah.
are not,
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
not required.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes. Oh, okay. So we're gonna have to get into that question. Sherry's question is about how does this apply to non-Jews? We spoke about this briefly in principle number 11, which was about Olam Haba, which is connected to resurrection, as we have seen, because there's no way to get to Olam Haba without resurrection. So we have to cover exactly is this what are the aspects of this subject with respect to non-Jews? Very important question. We'll have to cover that, please God, in our study. Yeah.
Anybody else?
So if you're supposed to hate them, does that mean you give up on them?
Okay, so is that Rose?
Yes.
Rose's question is, if you're supposed to hate them, does that mean you're supposed to give up on them? And the answer is no. The whole idea of resurrection is that even if they're dead, they can come back alive. So if they're alive, maybe not by the Torah standards, but they're still alive, there's still hope for them. So of course not. We don't give up on anyone. And even once they're dead, we don't give up on them. So we definitely don't give up on them, but there's a lot of work that they need to do to get back into the good graces of this nation. There are expectations. That's the Rambam's telling us. Again, I said when we started, it's like he uses very harsh, strong words. It's very harsh and strong words. Because he says, like, there are certain people that can be excluded from the category of the nation, even though they're part of the nation, because they're not ideologically part of the nation. But yes, that's your question, Rose. We would not give up on them. Absolutely not. Of course not. How can we give up on our brethren?
Hate means so many different things,
So again, so we define the hate. To answer Matt's question, we define the hate not as anything active, God forbid, but, and like I said, we don't give up on them, certainly not. But there is no need to fulfill any of the mitzvahs of love, the way the Rambam defines it. Any mitzvah of love and brotherhood and kinship would not be applied to such a person. Again, not a captive child, but someone who is an actual, heathen, a heretic, not someone who's ignorant. Today, everyone's ignorant. So this will not apply to anyone today, really. It's very, 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 very vanishingly rare to find someone who actually falls into this category.
It's not
Oh, yeah. 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 And again, if someone does not have this hatred, they maybe don't care enough about God. That's what I'm saying. It says the way the Roman phrase, the verse that he quotes from Psalms 139 is that those who hate God, you're supposed to hate. So this is someone who hates God. And if you see someone who hates God, how could you possibly love that person? Well, yeah, Psalms. Oh, yeah, Paul, we answered your question. Yeah.
Rabbi, I have a little clarification. Hates God. Isn't that broad? I mean, you could really say that in so many ways. If you don't believe 100%, but is not believing 100% categorized as hate Hashem to some? It would not?
No, so
Okay.
No, if someone is not really an expert in these 13 principles, would they qualify as someone who hates God? Of course not.
No. I'm just meaning, like, if someone says they don't believe, but they kind of, like, on what level is it? Because I get what you're saying. A lot of people just don't know enough. So really, there's probably not many people who really qualify, right?
I said there probably is no one who qualifies today.
Oh, okay.
Because
Okay.
again,
I'm sorry.
today
Maybe I
we
didn't
live in
say-
a world where most people are just ignorant. They're ignorant and they're captive children. They were never trained. They know nothing. So their beliefs are based upon nothing, or maybe what they read online. I don't know. I don't know where people base their beliefs, but they're not well rounded in our learning in a sufficient way that would rent them someone who can be outside the category of captive children, and someone who would be a candidate to be in this cohort.
I think there's something really important to go along with that. May I mention this? That this type of action that Rambam's talking about is about someone who knows, who intentionally goes against what God says. This is what Sodom and Gomorrah was about.
Yeah.
They knew the tenets of the Sheva Mitzvot, and they said, let's develop a society.
And even Sodom and Gomorrah, to Rose's point, what did Abraham do? He's praying and praying and praying, trying to save them. Yeah. And when they did come around, he would bestow kindness upon them. To try to help them. Yeah, it's a good example. But again, what Rambam is reinforcing is that, like, if someone hates God, how can we love that person? We have to hate them. So how does that play out? I mean, if they don't hate God, they're just ignorant. It's a different story. And to be someone who hates God, that's a terrible designation. That's a terrible designation. But someone like that, like, I can see no justification to love such a person.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I don't know if this is relevant, but adding on to that, if you're someone who hates God, your actions are probably going to be hateable as well. So there would be no reason not to hate them. Certainly. I forgot your name. Deacon. Deacon was saying that someone who hates God is probably not going to behave in a way that is congruent with said hate, and therefore their actions will be quite execrable and not admirable. Yes, that's a very good point. What a nice idea. Was this Sandy's idea to come here?
Yeah.
What a nice idea. Some people didn't really know that if we could pull it off to have the Zoom meeting.
The blame set.
Oh. Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
It was.
We're scheduled again first
Sunday.
First Sunday in December.
Right.
Which, let me see, when's that?
Also, we should go through the calendar, pick days that are going to interfere with other events. So
yeah,
maybe if you could look at it and tell me, and I'll amend the calendar.
It's Thursday too, right?
Yeah,
yes.
Thursday's not here though; it's on Zoom.
Right.
So we'll be doing it via Zoom.
Yes. So that's going to be December 3rd.
Right.
December 3rd is going to be.
Yeah, we need to.
It's going to be. We'll get together December 3rd.
Yeah. Okay. Just let me look at all the dates. I should have done it, but your calendar is probably a little bit more restricted than I would know. So. Why do you say that?
Well,
I'm just saying you might have other dates that you have other things going on or something, and you might have to.
Yes, but we could also, we could pivot.
Yeah.
If needed.
Yeah. Do it the next Sunday versus whatever. Yeah. That's easy.
Yeah.
Very easy to do.
Well, today's the first Sunday in November.
Correct.
So we're on schedule.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
Anybody
else wants to talk about anything?
I have a quick question, Rabbi.
Paul's question. Go ahead, Paul.
Slightly off topic, but end of last parsha, when Abraham and Isaac are going towards the mountain, and they have all the implements for the sacrifice, and Isaac asks about the lamb. So if he asks about the lamb, is there any significance to why they find a ram and not a lamb tangled up in the thicket?
I'm glad it's you.
What a clever question. Do lambs have horns?
No, but they have, okay, I thought about this, but they have the fur. And what's the most difficult cleansing is to remove the thorns from the fur. So it made me think.
They don't have shofars, right? They don't have shofars. Shofar, as we can tell, they don't have shofars. How are we gonna blow shofar with the ram's wool?
Okay.
That's a very clever question, Paul. Very clever. I like that question.
Well, maybe if Paul drove all the way from San Antonio, he wouldn't have asked that question.
Why not?
Because he would have figured it out.
The question's better than the answer.
That is a really good
I like that
question.
question. That's a good question. Clever. So he's asking for a seh, which is a lamb, and they end up with an ayil, which is a ram. Wow, what a clever question. Wow. So what's your question? You know, why did he think it would be specifically a lamb, and why did it end up being a ram?
Yeah, is there any significance in that? Why is it
He
different?
could have easily, just as easily have said, well, the way I would phrase your question is, it had to be a ram because maybe we needed the shofar, or there's something about the ram that's important. But why didn't he say, hey, where's the ram? Now, okay, just help me with this husbandry. A lamb and a ram are the same species. Is that true?
I think so, yes.
They are? Yes?
Like a rooster name. Yeah.
They're both sheep. So what's the difference between a lamb and a ram? A baby.
Maybe he started off as a lamb, but he was there so long he turned into a ram.
Sandy wants to suggest an answer, but I'm scared she'll say an answer, a clever answer that I could have thought of myself.
Everything that happened to the patriarchs was foretelling what was going to happen. The offerings that came later, is there a difference when you offered a lamb and when you offered?
Of course, there's differences.
So.
Yeah, but that's exactly his question. You know, why is there asymmetry between Isaac's question or what he thought should have been appropriate and what ended up happening?
But Isaac maybe is thinking of one kind of offering that would be a lamb, but wasn't the Olah offering, was it a ram?
The Olah offering was also lambs. The daily offering was I think it was a lamb. I get confused because I've never seen these animals, you know. I grew up very far away from animals. So a lamb and a ram are the same species. A lamb is a young one, male or female, and a ram is an adult male with horns. And they're both sheep. We'll get to, you had a question. What was your question? Your hand was raised. Yeah, you. What's your name? Hi, Levi. Levi, is Matt your dad? What's your question, Levi? What should we talk about instead? We could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about Lego, Power Rangers, Paw Patrol, football. What do you like? What do you like? Do you like Paw Patrol? You like football? You like the Texans? So let's talk about football. Maybe we'll do that afterwards. There's a lot of things we talk about, but there's the right time to talk about everything, Levi. Sometimes it's the right time to talk about astronomy. Sometimes the right time to talk about surfing. Sometimes the right time to talk about football and family. And sometimes the right time to assemble a puzzle. And sometimes the right time to talk about what Hashem wants. And on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock Central Time, we want to talk about what Hashem wants. But it's a great question, Levi. You must be really bright. It's your son's son? That's your son?
That's my son-in-law.
Oh, wow. Is this your grandfather? Wow. You got a very special grandfather, you know.
Special friends.
That's a very good question, Levi. You'll claim him?
Thank you.
Okay, who else? Yeah, go ahead, Sandy.
Going back to the idea of the resurrection, if we're clothed or not, do the mitzvot we do in this life have anything to do with what kind of clothes we would be?
Ever heard that question? Sandy asked a question. When the Talmud talks about the Cleopatra Rebbe Meir conversation, it differentiates between the clothes. It talks about the clothes of the wheat and then the clothes of the righteous. So Sandy wants to know if the mitzvos, the type of mitzvos that we do, will impact the kinds of clothes that we have. Very, very sharp question.
Yeah.
So
no, but it says that the mitzvahs that becomes the thread of our garment. That if you come in and you could have a tattered garment or you could have a very beautiful royal.
So Sandy is speculating that the type of mitzvahs that we do will impact the type of clothes that we have. I think there's a lot to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very sharp. Again, we're jumping way ahead, but let's put a little pin in that. Well, what's the nature of the clothing? Because it's, if you think about it, just to work through the reasoning here. Again, I'm not much of a farmer, as you know, but the analogy that it brought was of a wheat kernel that has a chaff to it. Those are attached, right? Your clothing's not attached to you, right? It's something which you wear.
So
You have to remove it.
it's not permanent. It's very hard to remove the chaff from the.
But certainly when the chaff comes out, it's very much, yeah. Yeah, you have to first break the chaff off the kernel, and then you have to winnow it. You have to clear it away, right?
Toss it up and it blows away effortlessly.
Right, but there's some work to do that. So if that's the type of clothing, it's not the type of clothing that we think of. It must be much more integral to what the kernel is, right? So that does seem to imply that it's not just an arbitrary clothing that goes on top of it. It's something which is much more fundamental. So again, very good question. We have to pursue that.
We also have to remember Adam and Eve had no clothing.
Well, they had garments of light.
Garments of light, exactly. And so that's the garments that we'll have, right? Assuming.
I hope I'm a candidate. I don't know. I'm not so convinced. It's only for the righteous. Not everyone qualifies. In Olam Haba, very much relates to it. Very, very, very much relates to it. Mary Lou mentioned about the avatar, which is the version of us that exists in Olam Haba. I think not only it relates to, I think it is it.
It is the clothing.
Everything that emerges is the version of ourselves.
Avatar here, or is it?
No, we're the other kind of human here.
So you know that in your portion where you've got Abraham, the Abraham, and then the Abraham here, and they eventually are going to merge, is that kind of? Maybe.
What you're saying is that I don't know if everyone here knows what you're talking about, because I did a podcast on my Parsha podcast channel titled Abraham. I thought it was amazing, I have to say. It was some of my finest work. So, but not everyone listened to it, I'm sure. Oh, well, I hope everyone listened to it. But if you don't know what Sandy's talking about, she's referencing something that I mentioned in the podcast, that there's a certain merging of Abraham at the end of his journey. He starts with the journey and he's going towards something, and at the end, Abraham is now juxtaposed, is adjacent to the other Abraham. Very, very powerful. I would recommend, if you haven't listened to it, you should give it a listen. It might be the opening chapter of the book. Just saying. I think it's a little too scary though. It's very, very powerful.
It is quite.
So I don't know. I'm worried that someone will open up the book and will say, "Oh my, you are swinging for the fences," and then it might scare them off. maybe we don't want them. I don't know. As I'm debating with that question, I mentioned in the podcast, I'm like, I don't know if it's too powerful. It's too
There's
terrifying.
Illumination within it that you didn't even bring out.
Oh, I said like there's some parts about this I haven't even mentioned because it's way too powerful and it might steer you off. So what Sandy's suggesting is that the version that you are in Olam Haba is going to be similar to the Abraham 2.0, which is the best and highest version of you. There's definitely something to that. Again, we have to think about it a little bit more. But very, very interesting, interesting angel. Pat mentions in the chat here about in the Eishes Chayil chapter, which we say Friday night, talks about the woman of valor. It talks a lot about clothing and the great works of the accomplished woman. So we know that there are some mitzvos that involve clothing. So that might be associated with the clothing of. You guys are all jumping so much further ahead of me. I'm such a rookie. I'm such an amateur. I'm such a novice.
Oh, please.
I'm a novice. And y'all are like throwing me 90-mile-an-hour fastballs.
That's the problem with doing a live class. Like before, you just shut it off and walk out. Now you
Right.
listen to all us pontificate about your collections.
And this is where they said it would get challenging.
Right, exactly.
Somebody guarding the door.
Yes,
There's
like
no
guarding the
again.
door. I think it's Jason or somebody.
Go ahead, Matt.
I did have a question about this week's Parsha, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And this might be the softball you're looking for.
Okay.
But it's probably an easy one. So we saw Lot and his daughters come out of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then they go into a city. They come out of that city, and then they procreate the daughters with Lot. And I believe that we're told that the reason is because the daughters think that they're the only ones left. And my question was, I'm just confused as to, they just went into an inhabited city and then left that city. How is that justification valid?
So evidently, what they saw in the city would not give them much confidence about the future of humanity. Because we know that that city didn't last very long either. We know that. So obviously, they were under the impression that the world needs to be repopulated by any means necessary. And that's why they made their fateful decisions. But yeah, it's a good point of inquiry. It's not quite a softball. It's like a minor league curveball. But clearly, we do see for sure is that there's no one. They say there's no one else in the world to repopulate the world, even though it was false. But they thought it was a version of a flood, like the Noah's flood, which that's it. They're the only survivors, and they thought whatever happened in Sodom and Gomorrah happened everywhere, which we know it didn't. It was more isolated. Yeah.
They had the forethought to bring wine to the cave.
Some things you just keep with you.
That's right.
It's part of your bug out bag.
Texas brisket. It had to be brisket and wine. Okay? You would assume they knew Abraham was alive.
I had that's a good question. Maybe they thought he would. Well, you won't do it with water, but maybe with some other means.
Water. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's another way to get rid of civilization. There's water, and then there's sulfur and fire and overturning the city. Oh yeah. Go ahead, Deacon.
So, at the resurrection of the Olam Haba, when we're given new bodies and everything, does a change in reality itself accompany that, as in a change in nature of?
Yes.
Does the universe change, or what happens?
It's a different universe. Yes, absolutely. And again, the nature of that is a subject of much mystery. But yes, that's exactly what we're saying. In messianic times, it's not a change in the world. Same world. It's different, of course. There's no Yetzer Hara, and that we have a temple, and there's peace, and there's stability, and there's abundance. There's a lot of things that are different about that world, but fundamentally the same rules of physics govern the world.
So does this universe die and another one is?
We'll have to talk about that. You got to come back, Deacon.
Yeah, I guess.
Resurrection of the universe.
We have to talk about that.
Those are good questions.
Yes, much more advanced than what we're trying to do this as, really start from the bottom, see what we know, and try to build up from there. You go ahead.
Going back to Elijah and Elisha raising the dead, is there any examples, or is it a possibility that there's a person righteous enough today or in the men of the great assembly that could
Do it. Maybe. Sandy wants to know if there's an Elijah or an Elisha around today that can maybe do this. Again, so even Elijah and Elisha, they didn't have the key to resurrection. Either they had it temporarily, or they didn't really have the key. They just prayed, and we could still pray. So maybe we could persuade God, petition God through our prayer to bring the dead back alive. Is someone that could do it today? Maybe. I don't know. I've never tried. I don't think I'm not a candidate for that. But probably not.
Well, but if we believe everything happens according to God's plan, he's in control, and he's decided for whatever reason at this person's time to die, wouldn't we kind of be going against that if we were trying to bring him back?
But he wants us also to be involved, right? God tells Moshe, I'm going to destroy everyone. So stop praying. I was like, wait, what? Why do those two clauses go together? Oh, it must be that God wants me to pray. So he wants to destroy them, but he wants me to pray. So he prays and he saves them. Because it is the will of God for us to also pray and to have a say. So ultimately, it's all going to be the will of God. Someone's sick. Well, is he sick because God knows it's better for him to die? Or is it because God wants us to pray so that way they are restored to good health?
Both.
Or maybe both. Yeah.
Well, it could be.
And if we don't do anything, it won't happen. They'll die. And it's a shame because they shouldn't have died.
Right.
Of course. Yes.
Well, what good does that person do when they're sick and you get to serve them and help them? And so it doesn't just affect that one person, but in that sickness, it allows others to be such a blessing to someone. And
That's certainly an
what does
element.
And what does it bring to the world?
Again, these are the kinds of calculations that we are not capable of doing. Only God can do these kinds of calculations. Yeah, that's certainly an element of that. Yeah. One more. Okay. Go ahead, Sandy.
This may be too far out there, so tell me I know you will, if it is. At the beginning, and we know the end is in the beginning, there was one person, Adam, he was like he was split in two, and originally there was the one being, and he was given a soul. And I have heard in other classes that when he sinned, his soul was shattered and sparks went out. So could and if we're going to go back to the original, could it be there's only going to be one body and one soul that's resurrected and reunited?
Okay, so I'm going to push back a little bit on your premises. And I'm going to ask you the following question. You differentiate between one person and many people. One person is one person, it's one being. But lots of people are lots of different beings. They're separate. But even one person, is it one being? Don't you have a pinky on this finger and a pinky on this hand and a pinky on this hand? And then there's the liver. And then there's the kidneys. And then there's the toes. And then if you're like our friend David Block, who is not in the Zoom anymore, but there's a beard. And there's the right eyeball and left eyeball. And there's all the ventricles of the heart, shoulder blades, elbows. Is one person one person? Was one person just a collection of lots of different things? How many cells does one person have? Billions, trillions? Each one's its own little universe. So who's to say that one person is one person when maybe one person is an amalgam of all sorts of different things? And who's to say that lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of people are really different people? Maybe they're just one big thing. And the dimension, just the way we view it is as being separate. The Midrash does say that, yeah, Adam was shattered into lots of different pieces, but even the composite pieces are all parts of Adam. So maybe it's the same thing. It's actually the same thing. And it's just the same human on a different dimension. On the Adam dimension, it's just one big human. On the shattered dimension, well, it's 600,000 people, or 3, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or 12, or 70, or 15 million, or 8 billion. It's a hard question to answer. And what I'm trying to say is that maybe it's not even mutually exclusive to have one or the other. You present the two options. Which ones would be in times of all about? Maybe it's both. So I don't know if I don't even today Adam's shattered, but still we have the composite parts, and they can be viewed on some dimension as being the same. So I know it's not such a satisfying answer. Oh yeah, okay, I'll take that. Anyone else before we sign off for not the week, because we'll meet again, please God, Thursday night.
Correct.
Who's that man on the Zoom with the big beard? Oh, just left.
Oh, it wasn't me.
Okay, so we're meeting on Thursday night.
Thursday night. 7
What
p.m.
time? 7 p.m.
On Zoom.
On Zoom.
nativzoom.com.
Okay. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone then. This was a lot of fun. In person, on the Zoom. Yeah, this was great. I'm looking forward to next opportunity.
Anybody that are watching the class would like to join us next time on the first
They're welcome to come.
first Sunday of the month. And if you guys want to stick around and maybe grab something to eat somewhere, maybe you can suggest a place that would be able to hold us.
We have next door.
I know.
So there's next door, and then there's Saba's.
Right.
Yeah.
Saba's
So
good. Pizza.
yeah.
What is that?
There's Saba's Pizza's that direction, Saba's Grill's that direction. Yeah.
Saba's
Well,
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Enjoy your lunch, everyone.
Thank you.
I don't think I could. I don't think so. I told my wife I'm gonna come home.
No,
I appreciate it though. Maybe
Yeah.
next time. Thank you for the kind offer.
Open,
Thank you.
open invitation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, take care, everyone.